Okay, and we are back. I haven't said that in ages, so I wanted to start with that. Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons, guys, and we have an amazing, brilliant, fantastic guest with us today.
Honestly. No, we're being serious.
We were looking at your site and we were really excited about this conversation.
I told them UI and UX of the site alone is exciting, but yeah.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about the economy, simplifying down the jargon and the stuff that, you want to know and you need to know, but there's a kind of barrier in terms of the way it's talked about. There's a lot of misconceptions out there, a lot of myths. And like I said, a lot of barriers. So we're going to be talking to Victoria from how do you say it? Is it economy or because the website is different to your actual name, right?
It's hyphens, URLs, I guess, domains.
Basically.
So I am your host, Keshav Bhatt, and we're with the main man, Mr. Louis Howell. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
You are the main man. You are the main man. So tell us a little bit about yourself, just in a really quick nutshell. Who are you? Why should we listen to you? And tell us about the work that you're doing with economy.
Sure. So I'm Victoria. I studied economics at university and definitely didn't think I was interested in it until I went to a place called SOAS, which is a really great university that looks at things from a really
Sorry, no, it is. I've set my sights on something. It's just in the atmosphere, but please continue.
It's just a place that looks at things in a really kind of global way and kind of finds the values and the culture and the politics in everything. And I was presented economics as this thing that wasn't just like maths and graphs and stuff, but really just a question of like, what is the world and how does it work? And how do we take all the stuff that we have and the energy that we have and the skills and the people that live on this planet and turn it into something great? And that was how I got interested in economics. But then I kind of found that like, I tell my friends I was doing economics and they were like, oh my God, that's so boring. And anyone that you meet, it just kind of switches off as soon as you say the words. And I guess it was basically just a bunch of geeks being like, this could be so much cooler, like wanting to show that the subject could be so much more than it was. So we were part of a student movement called Rethinking Economics, which is about reforming the curriculum at university of economics to make it more like real world. And then we realized that there was just as much of a problem outside of the classroom as inside of it in people's perception of economics. So we set up economy to try and change that. Basically,
that is it. But it's interesting how you literally realize from personal experience that economics was something that not only was important, but that could be interesting. And I think sometimes you do need to make what's important interesting, because certain things are just non-negotiable. Like it's vital that we learn about things like money and economics.
But this is the interesting thing. Like people know that as well. Like they don't. So like we would always joke that whenever we told people about setting up economy, you'd meet someone new and they'd be like, oh yeah, what do you do? You're like, oh yeah, like I set up this media platform and it's all about, and their eyes are like sparkling, and then you're like, economics, and they're like, oh God. And then they'd be like, no, I mean, like, I know it's important, yeah, but it's just really hard to understand. But they, like, people want to get it. And this, I think, is like one of the biggest, we're kind of trying to tackle two of the biggest myths around this subject. And one of them is that just like people just don't care, like people are apathetic, like they're not that interested. And they are. Like we just noticed that when we ask people, like, do you care about the economy or are you interested in economics? They say no. And then you say, are you interested in like money and wages and jobs and resources and the planet? And they're like, yeah, that all sounds really interesting. And it's like, my God, we just need to like rebrand the subject to show that it is all of those things. It's just really messed up its PR.
Wow. And the second myth? Or is that both
So
of
the
them?
second myth is that economists don't want you to know. Like I find that a lot of people think that way.
Right now. Hit that boing right
so
now.
The button. You want it's for.
That is it.
It's just a funny sound we have for when someone shares something really powerful and interesting.
Oh, cool.
So
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
No worries. Last week we had a fire extinguisher, so it happens sometimes.
Okay. It's like, I think these are just two of the biggest myths, really. Like, the public doesn't care, and the people who have the knowledge don't want to share it. And we find that we ask the public, and they do care, and we ask the people that have the knowledge, and they're like, oh my God, yeah, please, like, teach us how to communicate better.
Of course.
Because they're just geeks who want to share their knowledge too.
They don't know what they don't know. Yeah, that's it. That's it, of course. But as always, for our show, we start with a segment called Thanks for the Cut.
Okay.
And I'm told that between yourself and Keshav, you'll be sharing a cut on today's episode. I feel like your cut may be what we just spoke about yesterday, but let's not necessarily go there.
Which
you had
one?
something else.
Which one?
About the...
Okay, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, just in case you wasn't 100% sure, Thanks for the Cut essentially is a segment where we get our guests and we ourselves as hosts share a mistake that we've made and how we had to then bounce back from making that mistake and what we learned.
Okay.
And the reason we do it is because it's going on the premise that diamonds, they don't start off as diamonds. They start off as a piece of coal. They go through a process of extreme heat, extreme pressure, and then they get cut.
I feel like you guys thought about this before.
We talk about this regularly. But then they get cut and they get cut and they get cut by a diamond cutter until they become this amazing stone that we pay so much money for. And so in order to do that, we have to go through the process of being cut, and therefore we have to share when we are cut, and we get cut regularly. You know what I mean? We cut each other, we get cut by the outside world, but we're good.
In fact, I think you're not even in the shot right now.
Oh, sorry, I'm leaning. I'm leaning. I apologize. That's it. So we have to so we like to share our cuts. Okay. So I don't know if you've got anything you'd like to share, maybe a mistake you made that you'd like to share with our viewers.
I have a recent quite hilarious mistake that I made.
Awesome. Hilarious mistakes are the best.
Yeah. Basically, I was sending an email to the headmaster at a school that I'm not going to name about the prospect of us maybe like running some workshops with their students, and it was all quite exciting. We were going to do it with like 200 students, and it's quite a well-known school, and it was all, a really big opportunity. And so I wrote him the email, quite formal language, dear sir, thank you very much for taking the time to speak to me, and so on. And then I meant to link him our website, and unintentionally linked him to a website called Pineapple Party Hats, which is
How does that happen?
Well, my housemate just set up this really great startup called Pineapple Party Hats, which
and that is a great little shout out.
Shout out to
Go and
Pineapple
check it
Party
out.
Hats.
Go and check it out right now.
You really should. They're great. PineapplePartyHats.com, which I'd meant to be sending to someone else. And the lesson is always check what is on your clipboard, like what you've copied most recently, because it turned out it wasn't the URL to our site. He did then write back and say, I believe that you linked me to Pineapple Party Hats, but that's fine. I found your URL from your email signature. So always put your URL in your email signature.
So what was the lesson in that mistake for you?
Yeah, it was
the lesson.
For
so a few things, like one, make sure that you double check stuff before you send it. But then two, also just learning how to like navigate an embarrassing situation. Like I kind of just wrote back and said, I hope you agree that that's highly entertaining, but also like, I'm very sorry. And he did write back and he was like, yeah, that was quite funny.
Yeah.
So it was fine. Like I just think you're going to make mistakes and you sort of have to like laugh through it.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad that I'm not the only one, because on the episode before last, no, I didn't send someone to Pineapple Party Hats, but I did, and I've shared this with the viewers, but I did actually send a head teacher a proposal for something. Okay. But what I had done was I downloaded a Google Doc as a Microsoft Word document, but all the comments from Google Doc stayed there, but they weren't visible. So when I saved it as a PDF, I didn't check the PDF thinking, I've saved it, so I can see it's a PDF, I'll send it. Then she was like, I can see all your comments. So
shall we charge them?
Yeah. And literally we're having conversations about like things like, change this little section in the paragraph. Change it to this word. There's like, then there's one point right at the bottom where I was like, I think we could charge a bit more though. You know what I mean? Like, so anyway, but it was brilliant.
This is what, so guys, this is what I love about Thanks for the Cut, is because this is what it's about, is we're sharing those really, really human moments, and that's important, because when we try and like hide it away, we create a bit of shame and a bit of kind of, I need to keep my cards close to my chest, but also we're able to see like, I did that too.
Yeah.
Just on the episode before this, we had a very, very high profile guest, Adrian Harvey from Elephants Don't Forget. He was talking about the same thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it happens, right across the board, from volunteers and interns not checking their stuff to MDs and CEOs and co-founders and all kinds of things. So my Thanks for the Cut is actually semi-related to emails. We have a client who pays us on a monthly basis, and he was going to send us some money. And so he sent the money back in April, and we went through the management accounts recently. We've got an important board meeting coming up where every quarter we reflect on how we did and what we're doing next. And we checked through it and thought, okay, so there's a grand missing here. We haven't received anything. So I called him up yesterday, had a chat with him and said, so I know you've sent it over. Very, very trustworthy person. I know that if he says he's done something, he's done it. And it turns out he'd sent it to another account.
Okay.
And so as we dug deeper, we found out that he'd been a victim of a spoofing email where somebody had claimed to be someone from our organization and actually sent him
like an invoice or something.
We'd already sent him the invoice. They sent him an email saying, okay, I need you to make this transfer today. Here's the account number. It's a Barclays account, and here's a sort code. And he did actually reply back saying, but I normally pay it into the cooperative. So what's going on here? So that was the thanks for the cut, in that was on two accounts. One is I'm a very, very caring person, and like Lewis will tell you, anyone who is even remotely associated with me, like we're on the same couch now, we're like on the same team.
Yeah.
I'm very, very like protective and caring. So for me, especially as a CEO for Revolution Hive, I felt it that, I know how hard he works for that money, and that he's paying it to us to give him a service, and now we didn't receive it. And yeah, maybe you could say it's not our problem, but the fact that he's now out of pocket and it's caused him inconvenience, hassle, worry, that hurts me. So that was my thanks for the cut. But also that someone had, mimicked and tried to pretend to be someone from our organization. So for me, I guess, the lesson in this was, always, guys, if you're watching, check your what you're opening and the documents you're being sent. We then went through his entire email system and helped him with making it more secure, because we're always about going above and beyond in anything that we do, but also making sure that you're diligent and you're disciplined and you're checking your accounts, you're checking your passwords. And I think just as a matter of precautionary measures, making sure you change those passwords, every 3 months. And it's one of those things where we all know it, but you never actually think it could be you. And though it didn't happen to us directly, the fact that it happened to somebody who we consider, a part of our team and a part of the Revolution Hive family, that was really kind of sad. And there's all kinds of people out there that are very opportunistic, and it could happen to anyone. So that was the thanks for the cut. And we sat down and then discussed, okay, it hasn't happened to us as an organization, but let's be proactive and not reactive, and think about, okay, what can we do to make our communication more secure, but also to our clients, in any communications, make sure that they know, this is what you need to look out for, because this stuff happens. So that was my thanks for the cut.
But one of my responses was, okay, well, that means that there's a grand I need to go out there and make back. Do you know what I mean?
And it was interesting.
And I've got a call with a school shortly, so just keep it on the time for me, please, brother, as well. But yeah, no, please, sorry.
And it's interesting because actually, my reaction in those moments has now, and this is what I'm grateful for, actually, and I'm thankful, is in situations where those things happen and things hit the fan, something stoic happens to me, and I'm just cool and calm. And that's something I've had to build. And I remember we were speaking after, and his reaction was like, nah. And I was more just like,
this guy?
Yeah, exactly. Like, my cousin was sat next to me, was like, where does this guy live? Let me go find him. Like, we don't really know it. He could be like in, I don't know, in any country around the world.
Like beating him up.
It could be like Bradford, or it could be Baghdad, or it could be Algeria. I don't know. But I was thankful to myself that, I've been able to develop my mindset and resilience to a point where, in those situations, it's just important to stay calm, stay solution focused, and just think about, okay, well, what could it be? What are the potential outcomes? And in my brain was literally like, okay, it could be 1, 2, or 3 things. Let's test each one and see which scenario it is. And then if it's number 2 or 3, this is what I'm going to do. So, that comes from just all of these conversations we've had, and all the personal development. So anyway, I digress massively. Tell us about simple economics, and I know that I've got a
call at what time? Just check the time for me,
actually,
please, bro. So just make sure.
Otherwise, it's actually 11:30. So
on the dot.
It's 11:20.
Am I gonna miss the conversation?
Yeah, just at the right moment.
I'll tell you later.
Guys, listen. Thank you so much, Victoria. Kesh, I'll catch you shortly, brother. So, guys, the work never stops. Literally, the work never stops, man. This is just. I just got bottles everywhere.
And so to continue on our conversation and the main meaty part of our show, tell us about, the 3 things when you go into schools and you're working with young people. What are like the 3 key things that you're trying to get across to them and that you think they need to learn, because we've got massive audience of young people watching. And you talked about 2 of the myths, but I'm really curious to know, from all the stuff that you've studied and all the experts that you work with, what are the 3 main things that you think young people need to be aware about and learn?
So I think one of the biggest is just from the off, like knowing that you're part of the economy, which sounds really obvious, but it isn't for a lot of people. I think the way that we talk about the economy, people use words, if you ever sort of catch a conversation about it in the news, you'll hear them say like, oh, the economy's not doing very well, or like the pound is falling, or like interest rates are going up, but there isn't really much of a like human element in the way that we talk about it.
It's very externalized language, isn't it?
It's like we live here and the economy's over there and we got to make sure we don't mess it up because it's really important.
That's
and
so
it
true.
Doesn't make any sense because the economy wouldn't exist without. It's just a word.
What do you think would be a better way to frame that language then?
So, like, we say, for example, the example we use a lot is the pound is falling, okay? That is a phrase that is misleading because it makes it sound like the pound acts on its own and just rises and falls the same way that, like, the waves of the sea move, you know?
Yeah.
Actually, it would make more sense to say something like, because of the current, like, situation in the UK, in this case, if we're talking about the pound, people are nervous that, you know, businesses aren't going to work as well as they do usually, or like politics is unstable or something, which means that they've decided to sell their currency and invest in something a little bit safer. That's why the pound falls. It doesn't just fall, you know.
Yeah.
And that's what it kind of leads to. It just creates a bit of a situation of like panic and a sense of lack of control if you think like, oh my god, it's just falling or it's rising or whatever and we don't know what to do about it. Especially if you like earn in pounds and spend in pounds but don't have any sense of agency over what happens to that pound, when actually it's all of us every day using it and earning it and like deciding to spend it in a local shop or on an EasyJet flight or whatever, or lend it to a friend of ours. That's what makes it worth how much it is. Like that's the whole purpose of this currency. So it's like so directly tied to our day to day. That's the first thing. But then I guess the second thing actually would just be that the economy isn't just about money. It's one of the first words that people associate with the word economy and the word economics, money and like personal finance. And actually, I think obviously that's a huge, huge part of it. But it's also a question of values. It's a question of who do you think should get what and why. It's a question of like thinking about future generations. How do we manage the stuff that we have and the stuff that we need in a way that doesn't destroy like the prospects of people who live later? Even just the people living and working now, like taking care of the economy for people who are at school at the moment. So I guess, just broadening our thinking on what it is the second one. And I don't know, what would the third thing be? I guess the notion that an economist isn't necessarily what you think they are.
Okay.
So we do workshops in schools now, and we've done with like everyone from like 9-year-old kids to like 25-year-olds going to festivals that we go to sometimes. We ask them to draw what they think an economist looks like. And you can ask any age, they will draw a white man in a suit wearing glasses, holding a briefcase, usually with like a board and a stick, drawing lines that go up and down. This is 9-year-olds like drawing that, and I'm just like, how?
Where did that come
like,
from?
Yeah, like what are you doing? Like climb a tree. Why are you watching the TV? Like with economists,
Climb a
lines
tree.
going up and down. Anyway, and it's so damaging because I did one of these workshops, and when we said draw what you think an economist looks like, this little 9-year-old boy came up to me and he said, "Miss, are you an economist?" And I was like, "Sure." And he was like, "Okay." So then he drew me in a suit, wearing glasses with a briefcase. And I was like, "Okay, fine. We've got one step further. Like, at least you drew a
female,
woman, you know?
yeah.
But I'm not wearing a suit. Anyway, and it's just damaging because it sort of reinforces this idea that there's a very specific type of person that gets to decide what the economy is and how it works. And actually, anyone can be an economist.
That's really, really powerful, I think. And it's interesting the role that gender played there and those stereotypes as well. I'm curious also about some of the sessions that you run in schools. Like, so you talked about, drawing an economist. What are some of the really interesting ones that you run that you always find really great reactions from, or that you learn a lot from when you're working with young people?
So another one that we do, it really depends on the age groups, but if you've got younger kids, then another thing we do is like 3 big kind of myths about economics and trying to get them to think about whether it's true or false. So one really popular one is it takes 2 pennies to make a penny. Is that true or false? What do you think?
It takes 2 pennies to make a penny. I'm going to go with false.
You would be wrong.
Okay, so yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, so even here, so we did this with a group of 10-year-olds as well, split them into two sides, and they had to argue for true or false. And some of them were like, that's ridiculous, like, why would you bother spending 2 pennies to make a penny? And then the other ones were like, yeah, but think about how much it takes to make a penny. Like, you need the material, you need the factory, you need to pay all the workers, you need, like, insurance, like, there's so much behind it, right? And actually, if you think about what like coins are and what paper money is, especially paper money, it's just a piece of paper. And you can write a 5 on one and a 10 on the other, and then apparently this one is worth double that one. But it's still just a piece of paper, and it relies on us believing that this is worth double for this to mean anything as a system. So similarly, it takes 2 pennies to make a penny, but then you can stamp, obviously the weight is slightly different, but it's not massively different between like a 1p, 2p or 5p coin. So it's just about the number that you write on it that determines how much it's worth, apparently, in the real world. But actively, the cost of it is about 2 pennies for a single penny.
What's like the most frustrating thing for you about this whole conversation around economics, the economy, in terms of change? Because I think there's massive inequalities that exist. There's lots of apathy. There's lots of people not being able to relate to it, as like you were talking about earlier. What's the thing that frustrates you guys the most about that kind of whole topic? I know it's a big question, but I'm curious, what are the things, I guess, that you feel worried about, or that you want to kind of really get like, hey, no, it's like this,
Yeah. I think personally it's the fact that that the subject of the economy tends to like shut down conversation rather than spark it. So you notice this, like, especially with politics, that if you listen to politicians and the way that they talk about the economy, obviously this is a generalization and not all of them do this, but they tend to say, this is the world we want to live in and this is the world we want to create. But unfortunately, like, the economy is in a really bad way and the deficit is too high and whatever. So we're going to have to do this now to fix that. And then later we can create this world we want to live in. And that, like, separation, again, it's that question of, like, the economy's over there and we're over here, I think is just something really disempowering for a lot of people.
In some ways, do you think it's a bit of a red herring?
Yeah.
So that, you can talk about something that people can't relate to and don't really understand because of that. And then it becomes this kind of enigma that, because of this weird thing over here, we can't do the stuff over here that you want.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think so. And I feel like if people had a stronger sense of, like, well, the economy is just whatever we want it to be, and they had some basic understanding of things like what money is and how it works, how, like, government spending works and how governments get their money. Like, a very common misunderstanding, I think, is the idea that the government and our national economy works exactly the same way that your personal money management works, which it doesn't, because it's so much more complex. Like, the difference between one person managing their in and out, like, budget versus trying to manage everybody's interaction with each other isn't the same thing. But we talk about it as if it was, which means, again, you can say, we're just running out of money, or we can't afford that. And people can relate to that personally because they're like, yeah, I know what it's like to run out of money. But it's a misleading way to discuss it. And it stops people from being able to really have an opinion on something like austerity or something like whether we should reduce the deficit or whatever, if they just don't know what those words mean and can't put them into context. So if we could reverse that, that'd be great.
Where else do you see that happening in terms of, what's the difference when you're working with a 9-year-old? I know you do a lot of stuff online. Do you see any kind of patterns in terms of age groups or demographics as well in how people feel about this kind of economic conversation?
Do you know what? No. Like, okay. I really think just across the board, we talk to people. So we have several kind of parts of what we do. One of them is this, like, engagement in schools. The second is a media platform where we try to, like, de-jargon the headlines. So let's say it's Brexit, let's say it's the election. We just try and simplify it, say, this is what's really going on. What do you think? And then we also just do loads and loads of interviews with people of all ages to produce research that we can show economists and show politicians and say, this is how people feel about this subject. So we talk to people of lots of different age groups, and it's just astonishingly similar. The confidence of someone who's 65 and the confidence of someone who's 10 to talk about the economy and what it is, and also just what they want from the
Yeah.
subject. So they say just speak to me, like speak in my language.
Yeah.
Tell me what's actually going on, rather than like talking in a way that means I have to be constantly Googling words and then going
Why
back
do you
to the
think that
article.
people are doing that? Why do you think that it isn't simplified? Do you think that it's because there's an inherent benefit to people who kind of add jargon and make it complicated? Or do you think that it's something else? Like, what do you think the reason is that people aren't just talking on a very human, simplified level?
Yeah, I think it's really just like economics is a discipline like any other, and we have jargon in every discipline all the time, and that's not necessarily a problem. Like even, you know, within this space, like you'll refer to like the lounge or whatever, and not everyone will know what that is, but that's okay because it's like shorthand, right? But I guess economists and like the economics discipline has kind of forgotten that it is a subject that matters to everybody, and that there is a public interest in it. And so I think it's almost just like, I really don't think it's like on purpose. I don't think it's deliberately trying to hide anything. I think it's just a language that developed its own like specialist vocabulary to a point where it kind of became a bit too wrapped up in itself. And now it's like people are kind of knocking in from outside,
What's
being
in
like,
here?
hey, like...
What's going on? Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes because the level of trust is so low in our institutions that have power and influence, the media, the government, politicians, bankers, economics, like all those big kind of areas of life, there's a kind of sometimes a suspicion of, no, they're doing it on purpose, and there's a victimhood that's created. But yeah, I agree that also it's just jargon, and it can become quite an insular world. And one of the best things that I did an English literature degree. One of my lecturers, I wrote a great essay, or so I thought, and it came back to me with some red pen and said, go and read George Orwell's Politics in the English Language.
Yeah.
And I read that, and that really impressed upon me that, you know, using simplified language is the best way to communicate, because one, people can understand you better, but two, you have to have a real understanding and skill to be able to take complex ideas and still have that variance and gradient amongst them, but still have it in very clean, simple language that anyone can access. And that's a real skill. Like it takes, you know, you got to understand it. You got the jargon, then it's like another step on top of that.
But the really vital thing to understand is that I think it's not dumbing it down. That's something that people say all the time.
Yeah.
Like, well, you don't have to just dumb it down for people. Like people aren't stupid, and it's like no. It's not their fault. It's our fault. Like we have to learn to. I mean, there's some like Einstein quote, I think, or I can't remember who it is. Like if you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself,
Exactly.
right? Like
I think it was Einstein.
Yeah.
Correct us if we're wrong. Put it in the comments just in case.
Like it's almost, it is a question, I guess, as an English student, you'll know it even better. Like language, if language is fundamentally about communication, then you're doing something wrong if you're trying to say something and the majority of people don't know what you're
and
saying.
also, you know, at a very human level, I think, what's the point in hoarding all this information and knowledge if you can't share it with people? And I think with knowledge, it's if we're on quotes, like love is one of the like most powerful emotions, but if you think about like knowledge, the quote is something like knowledge is a lot like love, it's only useful when shared. So there's no point in kind of holding on to it. Like share it out with people. And I guess, you know, also I can understand that for a lot of academics or people who are in this conversation of economics, there's a lot of pressure, you know, you're quite in your own world, but then like you said, it's about opening it up.
Especially because like so much of economic theory is about making assumptions about human behavior. And so you'll say, if, for example, you're an economist and you're given a job, like now with Brexit, there will be lots of economists who are tasked by the government or by business to say, tell me what's going to happen to the economy if we leave or if we remain, right? Like, what a job.
Where do you even start?
Where on earth do you start? And how on earth would you do it without relating to people? Like, you have to be able to really understand. It's why more and more economists are looking at psychology. There's this area of behavioral economics, which is just all about like really understanding the links between human behavior and the wider effect on the economy. And And there was a real issue with that a lot of people in the student movement that I was part of felt when you come into your first economics lecture and around the world you get the same set of assumptions about humans, about the fact that we make rational choices and that we all have this concept called perfect information of like we know everything there is to know about the choices that face us, and just these assumptions that are just like, you're like, that's not me, is that you? Like, is that, am I like really missing something?
Like the whole discipline is kind of almost founded on some very shaky
assumptions about people, and so surely like the first way to kind of dismantle those and get a clearer picture.
How would you if we go a step back, like what is economics? What is it?
That question.
Because what we think it is and what it actually is totally different.
Yeah.
And even the people learning it are being taught it from the wrong starting point.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I can't give you the definition of economics. I can give you my own understanding of what economics is. Like for me, it is just the study of how we decide to allocate the resources that we have and the skills and the energy of this planet. But that is by nature a question of values and culture and politics and not maths.
and I think anyone who is unable, I'm thinking of the working class kid who lives on a council estate in Kent. Anyone who's not able to answer that, they're not able to imprint their values and ideas into a conversation that needs to be inclusive. And that's what, like your definition speaks of it, economics is all about. And that's the thing, I guess, from my point of view, I'm speaking it, also as like the Rev Hive t-shirt on. It's worrying because, we did a session a couple of weeks ago on politics, just understanding what is politics? Like, how does it work? Why should you care about it? And just at the mention of the word, we had 90% of the kids in this room who are, very disadvantaged young people. So it's a particular group. I don't want to hear about that. Don't talk to me about that. And getting visibly angry. So if that's just politics, if we talk about relationships, confidence, economics, you can imagine the different reactions and how disabling they are just at the very utterance of the word.
But you can understand why those reactions happen,
absolutely,
right? Like,
absolutely, and that's why we exist.
Why would you have a positive association with the word politics at the moment? Like, and yet I
think it's changing though on politics, which is very exciting, especially for young people. The other question that I had for you was, who do you rate right now, in this kind of world of economics? Like, who are the leading thinkers, organizations, books? Like, who are the people that you look to and think, they are, not just kind of leading voices, but they're thinking 2 steps ahead?
So it's really exciting, actually, because you see that just like in politics, there's more and more people realizing, like, we need to get young people engaged in this subject. We need to make it interesting, make it fun, recognize that people do care about this if you just frame it differently. Similar kind of movements are starting to happen in economics as well. I would definitely say, like, from a very biased perspective, the movement Rethinking Economics, like, I really, I would never have stayed in this subject if it weren't for them. Because I just would have felt totally isolated as someone who thought that this had to be a little bit different, and then suddenly found out that all around the world people were feeling the same way. So that was really massive. In terms of like economy, there's one particular economist called Ha-Joon Chang, who has written a book called Economics: The User's Guide. And that was a really big help for us when we were starting up economy and trying to think about how to package information on this massive subject. Because it's just one of the only books that acknowledges like the breadth of the subject, writes in terms that make sense, and it's just quite an enjoyable read. It's quite funny. There's like references to the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and stuff.
I need to definitely check that out.
Yeah, take a look at that book. That one's really good. There's more and more really great like videos online. Vox does some great animations. There's a crash course in economics online if you look that up. So yeah, more and more people who are also like thinking about where young people are. Like, don't just put stuff in a textbook that nobody's going to read. Like, they're on YouTube, put it on YouTube, stuff like that, which we're seeing more and more. So yeah, it's definitely growing.
And even in the UK, there's some great organisational things going on. Neat Economics Foundation. You've got Positive Money yourselves. My Bank, if you've heard of those guys.
My Bank is great.
And we had somebody on, Andrew Priestley, who's written a book called The Money Chimp. Just a very practical guide on like things that young people can do related to wealth and entrepreneurship and finance. So it's an exciting time because I think the information is there. It's just making sure it gets to the people that need it most.
Absolutely.
So I want to move on to the final kind of 2 segments of the show. Social reform fail of the week. And I think that you'll probably have a really, really good one. So let me explain. Social reform fail of the week. So we talked about thanks for the cut at the beginning. This segment is all about looking at society and an attempt of social change that someone has made but failed massively and made a mistake that you can learn from. So I'm curious, from your point of view, what's been a recent social reform fail that you've seen that you think, okay, guys, that wasn't the right way to do it?
So there's one, this isn't necessarily recent, but it was something that struck me that I learnt about when I was studying economics, which was about microfinance. So microfinance is this idea that instead of giving big amounts of money in loans to like a big government organization or a big charity, you give money directly to people who need it. And it was particularly looking at like developing countries around the world, and how to empower people on the ground who have lots of ideas and lots of energy but don't have that like initial boost to keep them going. And this idea was massive in like the world of economics for a while, and was tested out particularly with women in India and Bangladesh. And a lot of people hailed this as like the way, especially to give women some independence in families where the man generally controlled finances, and women controlled the household, but never really had their own like economic independence. And I feel like if you just look at this on the surface, you Google microfinance, women, South India, whatever, you'll get lots and lots of really positive stories. You'll think, oh, this is the answer to all our problems. But then there were quite a lot of studies that showed that actually in a lot of situations, it led to like really serious difficulties in the household, even leading towards like women committing suicide because of like financial pressure. Because of not having any level of like education on how to manage money and how to manage finances, to the point where it was just this like sudden, really overwhelming responsibility with no support. And then also just the fact that a lot of the organizations giving the money probably didn't think enough about just the politics of gender and of like giving the money to a woman and how the man would react. And so often the men became very angry, became quite insulted, and it just led to like really tense household relationships. And so to me it was just a really good example of like great idea, great intention, but too many assumptions being made about local context. And that's a problem in economics quite a lot, of like a lack of understanding of the nuance of different cultures. So yeah, it's just something that I think the whole discipline can learn from, of like, don't get ahead of yourself and assume that human relationships are the same around the world. Like, make sure you know as much as you can about the culture of the place that you're working in before you give it.
And that's something that's happened, quite a few times before. We talked about it on a previous episode with Play Pump International. And the assumption of how they were going to give that aid and support. So that's a really, really great place to kind of wrap up because we're out of time. But really quickly, I just wanted to find out where people can find you on social media, because you've got an amazing website. So yeah, just tell us about the newsletter, because I think that's something people should definitely go and check out. And also the website and like the kind of stuff that you guys are doing on there, because it's all related to the stuff we're talking about. And you've already created a lot of these solutions for the people that are watching.
Doing our best. Am I speaking to the camera? Am I speaking
to whoever you want. You can talk to the camera. You can talk to me.
So our website is the word economy, but without the O's. We went on Lauren Levan to talk about it, and she was like, oh yeah, like subtract or MGMT. I was like, yes, that was the plan. So it's ecnmy.org. We have a weekly newsletter where we do like a jargon-free version of the news. We have a section called Learn, which tries to take everything in an economics textbook and kind of repackage it in relation to your life. And we have a section called Act, where you can download materials to like start conversations with family and friends, or in the classroom, about what the economy is and how you fit in. So the main thing is ecnmy.org, and from there you'll find all our Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and then
they've also got an amazing weekly newsletter that I've just subscribed to. So great. I'm excited about my first email, which I think it breaks down the news and everything else that's going on.
So it's big stories this week, de-jargoned.
Awesome. So definitely go check that out, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of Leadership Lessons. Peace.